I woke up at 3 in the morning to the sound of my phone buzzing like an angry wasp on my nightstand. And when I saw it was dispatch calling, I knew someone's life was about to depend on whether I could get through 12 inches of fresh snow in the next 20 minutes. "Frank, we need you," Maria's voice crackled through the speaker. "Got a critical patient transfer coming in hot from Mercy General to Denver Regional. Highway's buried and we need the access road cleared yesterday." "I'm on it," I said, already pulling on my thermal pants. "Frank Ingram, that's me. Not a doctor, not a paramedic, just a guy with a heavy-duty Ram 3500 and the biggest snow plow attachment money can buy." For the past 5 years, I'd been the unofficial lifeline between our little subdivision of Pinewood Heights, Colorado, and Denver Regional Hospital, clearing the winding access road that connected us to the main highway whenever Mother Nature decided to dump her problems on our doorstep. I grabbed my keys and stumbled into my garage, hitting the button to open the door. The cold air slammed into me like a physical wall, and I could see the snow still coming down in sheets under the streetlight. My truck sat there, reliable as always, but something was wrong. The front looked naked, incomplete. My plow attachment was gone. I stood there in my garage, barefoot on the concrete, staring at the empty space where $7,000 of hydraulic snow removal equipment should have been attached to my truck's front end. For a solid 10 seconds, my brain refused to process what my eyes were telling me. Then I saw the notice taped to my garage wall, fluttering slightly in the wind. "Notice of HOA violation and property removal," it read in aggressive block letters. "The unauthorized commercial equipment stored on residential property at 1247 Meadowbrook Lane has been removed in accordance with Pinewood Heights HOA Regulations Section 7.3.2. Equipment may be retrieved from Mile High Impound upon payment of removal and storage fees." Signed, Brenda Morrison, HOA President. I called Maria back with shaking hands. "I can't do it. The HOA towed my plow." There was a long silence. "Are you serious right now?" "Dead serious. It's gone. They must have come by yesterday while I was at work." "Frank, we have a 6-year-old girl with a failing liver. She needs to be in Denver in 2 hours or she doesn't make it to transplant. The highway's closed. You're our only option." I looked out at the snow, then back at the notice. "Give me the impound address. Maybe I can get it back." Mile High Impound was 40 minutes away in good weather. In this storm, it might as well have been on the moon. I called them anyway, sitting in my truck with the engine running and the heater blasting. "Yeah, we got a plow attachment here," the night attendant drawled. "Big orange thing." "That's it. I need it back right now. Emergency." "Sure thing. That'll be $300 for the tow, $200 for storage, and $150 processing fee." "Storage, you've had it less than 24 hours. 24-hour minimum, buddy. Also, I'm gonna need proof of ownership, registration, and a release form from whoever had it towed." "The HOA had it towed. There's a medical emergency. A kid's going to die if I can't get that plow." "Look, man, I sympathize, but I got rules. No release form from the HOA, no equipment." I could lose my job. I hung up and immediately dialed the emergency HOA number. It rang 8 times before going to voicemail. Brenda Morrison's saccharine voice informed me that HOA business hours were Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and all calls would be returned within 3 business days. It was Saturday morning at 3:15. I tried her personal number, which I'd gotten last year when she'd personally hand-delivered a violation notice because my trash cans were visible from the street on a non-collection day. She answered on the 6th ring, and she did not sound happy. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" "Brenda, you had my snow plow towed. I need it back right now. There's a medical emergency. Mr. Ingram, she said, her voice dripping with the kind of condescension usually reserved for particularly stupid children. Your snow plow attachment is not an emergency. What is an emergency is that you've been violating HOA regulations for months by keeping commercial equipment on residential property. I warned you 3 times. Those warnings went to my old email address. I never got them, and I used that plow to clear the access road to the hospital. There's a kid who needs transport right now. That's not the HOA's problem. Perhaps you should have thought about that before violating our community standards. The equipment can be retrieved during normal business hours once you've paid the appropriate fines and removal fees. Brenda, are you listening to me? A child is going to die. Don't be so dramatic. I'm sure the hospital has other options. Now, if you'll excuse me, some of us have to work in the morning. Oh wait, it is morning thanks to you. She hung up. I sat there in my idling truck, snow piling up on the windshield, trying to figure out what to do. The access road was technically private, maintained by a weird agreement between the HOA and the county. It wound through 3 miles of forested hills before connecting to Highway 285. When it got buried like this, nothing got through without serious equipment. The county plows focused on main roads. The hospital couldn't send ambulances up the access road in these conditions. That's why I'd started doing it in the first place, after my neighbor died 5 years ago waiting for help that couldn't reach him through the snow. My phone rang again. Maria. Frank, what's the status? I'm working on it. Can they delay? No. The donor liver is viable for 12 hours from harvest. They're at hour 7. She needs to be in surgery by hour 10, which means she needs to be on the road in the next 90 minutes. I made a decision that would either make me a hero or a criminal. Tell them to start transport. I'll have the road clear. How? Don't ask. I drove to my buddy Kevin's house 4 streets over. Kevin Russo worked construction and had a small equipment trailer in his driveway, along with a bobcat with a bucket attachment. Not ideal for snow removal, but it would have to do. I called him while I drove. This better be good, he answered groggy. I need to borrow your bobcat, right now, life or death. Kevin and I had served together in Afghanistan. When he heard the situation, he didn't hesitate. I'll get the trailer hitched. 20 minutes later, I was hauling his bobcat toward the access road. The snow was relentless, and my truck's 4-wheel drive was working overtime. I called Maria to get an exact timeline. They're loading her now. Frank, her name is Sophie Chen. She likes dinosaurs and wants to be a paleontologist. She's going to be one, I said, surprised by the fierceness in my own voice. I promise. The access road was worse than I'd thought. The snow had drifted in places, creating walls 3 feet high. I unloaded the bobcat and started pushing, working as fast as I dared. The bobcat wasn't made for this, and it was slow going. Each push moved maybe 10 feet of snow. The road was 3 miles long. I was half a mile in when my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Ingram, this is Officer Patterson with the Pinewood Heights Police. We've received a report that you're operating heavy machinery on private property without authorization. Officer, there's a medical emergency. A child needs transport to Denver Regional. This road is the only way through. Sir, I understand, but we have to respond to all complaints. Are you aware that you're operating on HOA property without permission? I'm aware. I'm also aware that Colorado has Good Samaritan laws. I'm preventing imminent harm. There was a pause. Look, between you and me, I think what you're doing is right. But the HOA president is insisting we respond. I need to at least document that I made contact. Can you just confirm your identity and location? I gave him the information, and he said he'd note that I was responding to an emergency. But he also warned me that it probably wouldn't stop Brenda from pursuing charges or more HOA violations. I didn't care. I kept pushing snow. At 4:30, I was 2 miles in. My arms ached from controlling the bobcat, and the cold had seeped through my layers. I'd been working for over an hour in sub-zero temperatures, but I was making progress. Then the bobcat sputtered and died. I tried the ignition. Nothing. I checked the fuel gauge. Empty. No, 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 I muttered, trying again. Kevin must have been running on fumes. I should have checked. I slammed my hand against the steering wheel, then immediately regretted it as pain shot through my frozen fingers. I had 1 mile left to clear and no way to do it. I called Maria. I'm stuck. Equipment failed. Frank, they're already on the road. They left 5 minutes ago. There's no turning back. I looked at the wall of snow ahead of me, then back at my truck. I had a regular metal plow blade for my truck, the kind for driveways and parking lots. It wasn't meant for this kind of heavy work, but it was all I had. I drove my truck past the dead bobcat and attached the small plow to the front hitch. Then I started ramming through the snow, using the truck's weight and power to bulldoze a path. It was brutal on the vehicle, and I could hear things straining and grinding that definitely shouldn't be, but I kept going. By 5:45, I'd cleared the last section. My truck was making a horrible whining noise. The check engine light was on, and I was pretty sure I'd destroyed the transmission, but the road was passable. I pulled to the side and called Maria. Road's clear. Tell them to punch it. You're a miracle worker, Frank. Just doing what's right. 20 minutes later, I saw the ambulance lights coming up the access road, cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. They were moving fast, and as they passed me, I saw a small shape visible through the rear window, bundled in blankets. Sophie. Going to her second chance at life. I sat there in my dying truck, exhausted and freezing, and felt something warm in my chest despite the cold. This is why I did it. This is why it mattered. Then my phone rang again. Brenda Morrison. I'm watching you on the access road camera, Mr. Ingram. Not only did you operate unauthorized equipment on HOA property, but I see you've damaged the road surface with your reckless plowing. You're looking at thousands in repair costs, plus fines for multiple violations. I'm calling an emergency HOA board meeting for Monday morning to discuss your expulsion from the community. A child's life was saved, I said quietly. That's very dramatic, but it doesn't excuse breaking the rules. Rules exist for a reason. Without them, we have chaos. You'll be receiving formal notification of all charges by end of business Monday. She hung up before I could respond. I drove home slowly, my truck barely making it up the last hill to my house. I pulled into my garage and just sat there, too tired to move. My phone buzzed with a text from Kevin. Heard what you did. You're a good man. Don't worry about the bobcat, we'll get it later. I managed to drag myself inside and collapse on my couch. I was asleep within seconds. Monday morning came too fast. I woke to find my driveway covered with papers. Violation notices, all printed on the HOA's official letterhead. There had to be 20 of them. Operating commercial equipment without authorization, damaging common property, disturbing the peace, unauthorized access to restricted areas. Each one carried a fine ranging from $500 to $2,000. The total came to $18,500. There was also a formal notice of a special board meeting scheduled for that evening at 7, where the board would vote on whether to begin foreclosure proceedings on my property due to repeated and egregious violations of community standards. I called in sick to work. I was a logistics coordinator at a medical supply company, and my boss was understanding when I explained the situation. Well, the medical emergency part. I left out the part about possibly losing my house. I spent the day trying to figure out my options. I called a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. His consultation fee was $300, and after hearing my story, his advice was simple and depressing. Mr. Ingram, Colorado HOA law is complicated, but here's the bottom line. You did violate the CC and Articus multiple times. Even if your intentions were good, the HOA has the legal right to enforce its rules. You can fight it, but litigation against an HOA typically costs $30,000 to $50,000 and takes years. Most people can't afford it. So I should just pay. That depends. Can you afford $18,000 in fines, plus whatever they charge for road repairs? No. Then you need to either negotiate a payment plan or prepare for foreclosure. HOAs in Colorado have broad powers. If you default on fines, they can place a lien on your property and eventually force a sale. I thanked him and hung up, feeling sick. At 6:30 that evening, I walked over to the HOA community center for the board meeting. It was a small building next to the neighborhood pool, closed for winter. Inside, 5 people sat at a long table. Brenda Morrison sat in the center, wearing a navy blue blazer that screamed middle management. To her right was Harold Chen, the vice president, a retired banker who always looked like he'd just smelled something unpleasant. On her left was Patricia Walsh, the secretary, a woman in her 70s who'd moved to Pinewood Heights to be close to her grandchildren. The other 2 board members were Richard Stokes and Jennifer Martinez, both of whom I'd barely interacted with. About 15 residents sat in the folding chairs facing the board. I recognized most of them. Some looked sympathetic. Others looked like they were here for the entertainment. Brenda gavelled the meeting to order with unnecessary force. This emergency session has been called to address serious violations by resident Frank Ingram of 1247 Meadowbrook Lane. Mr. Ingram, you're here to answer for multiple infractions including unauthorized equipment storage, unauthorized use of common areas, and destruction of HOA property. How do you plead? This isn't a court, I said, and I'm not pleading to anything. I cleared the access road so an ambulance could get through. A little girl's life depended on it. So you admit to the violations. I admit to saving a life. Brenda shuffled her papers with practiced irritation. Mr. Ingram, your melodrama aside, you violated clearly established rules. The CC and Articus explicitly prohibit commercial equipment on residential property. Section 7.3.2, which you signed when you purchased your home. I use that equipment to help people. The rules don't have an exception for feeling helpful. Now, you're also responsible for damage to the access road. We had it inspected this morning. Your aggressive plowing gouged the asphalt in several places. Repairs are estimated at $12,000. The road was covered in 3 feet of snow. Some scraping was inevitable. Scraping? Harold Chen leaned forward. Mr. Ingram, you tore chunks out of the pavement. This is going to cost the association significant money, which comes from all our dues. Patricia Walsh cleared her throat. I have a question. Mr. Ingram, is it true that you've been clearing this road for years? For medical transport? Yes, madam. About 5 years now. Whenever there's heavy snow, the access road becomes impassable. I started doing it after Ben Walters died waiting for an ambulance that couldn't get through. I remember that, Patricia said softly. That was terrible. Brenda cut in sharply. Mrs. Walsh, that's irrelevant to the current violations. I don't think it is irrelevant, Patricia said, and there was steel in her voice now. If Mr. Ingram has been providing a vital service to our community, perhaps we should have addressed this differently. He was breaking the rules. To save lives, apparently. The meeting was starting to get heated when the door opened. A woman in her 40s walked in, dressed in jeans and a Denver Regional Hospital sweatshirt. She had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and tired eyes that suggested she hadn't slept much. "I'm sorry I'm late," she said. "I'm looking for Frank Ingram." I raised my hand. "That's me." She walked over and extended her hand. "Teresa Ming. My daughter is Sophie, the little girl you saved Saturday morning." The room went quiet. "How is she?" I asked. Teresa's eyes filled with tears. "She came through surgery beautifully. They're saying she'll make a full recovery. The surgeon told me that if she'd arrived even 30 minutes later, the donor liver wouldn't have been viable. You gave her a second chance at life, Mr. Ingram. You gave me my daughter back." She hugged me, and I heard sniffles from several of the residents in the chairs. Brenda cleared her throat loudly. "Mrs. Ming, while we're all happy your daughter is well, this meeting is about HOA violations. Perhaps you'd like to stay, but please take a seat." Teresa turned to look at the board. "I'm sorry, who are you?" Brenda Morrison, HOA president. "We're addressing serious rule violations. You're the one who had his plow towed." "I enforced community standards, yes." Teresa's expression hardened in a way that made me glad I wasn't Brenda. "Let me make sure I understand this. My daughter was dying. This man risked everything to make sure she could get to Denver, and you're punishing him for it. He violated multiple regulations. My daughter would be dead right now if not for him. You understand that? Dead because of your rules. Mrs. Ming, I understand you're emotional, but rules exist for a reason. Mr. Ingram had other options." "What other options?" I interjected. "The highway was closed. The county wasn't plowing. You had my primary equipment impounded. What exactly should I have done differently?" "You could have waited for proper authorities." There was no time to wait. An older man in the back row stood up. I recognized him as George Patterson, a retired fire chief who lived on Aspen Court. "Brenda, I've been listening to this nonsense for 20 minutes. Frank did what needed to be done. Instead of fining him, we should be thanking him." "Mr. Patterson, the rules apply to everyone." "Then the rules are stupid." Several people murmured agreement. Brenda's face was turning red. "Order! I will have order at this meeting." "Mr. Ingram, the board has prepared a resolution. You will pay all fines totaling $18,500, plus estimated road repairs of $12,000, for a total of $30,500. Payment is due within 30 days, or we will begin foreclosure proceedings." "I don't have that kind of money." "Then I suggest you find it. We'll also need your assurance that you'll never again operate equipment on HOA property without authorization." Teresa stepped forward. "This is insane. You're going to take his house because he saved a child's life. We're enforcing our community standards. Your community standards almost killed my daughter." The meeting erupted. People were shouting, arguing, and Brenda was banging her gavel so hard I thought she might break the table. Through the chaos, I noticed Patricia Walsh watching everything with a troubled expression. Finally, Brenda managed to restore something resembling order. "This meeting is adjourned. Mr. Ingram, you have your notification. The board's decision is final." "Actually," Patricia said, "it's not final until we vote." Brenda turned to her slowly. "Excuse me, we need a board vote on enforcement actions over $10,000. It's in our bylaws, Section 12.7. Brenda's jaw tightened. "Very well. All in favor of the enforcement action against Mr. Ingram." Brenda, Harold, and Richard raised their hands. Jennifer Martinez kept hers down, looking uncertain. "Mrs. Walsh," Brenda prompted. "I vote no, this is wrong." "That's 3 in favor, 2 against. The motion passes. I stood up. Then I guess I'll see you in court. I walked out, Teresa following me. Outside, she caught up to me in the parking lot. Mr. Ingram, Frank, I can't let this happen. You saved Sophie. Let me help you fight this. It's not your fight. The hell it isn't. My husband is an attorney. He specializes in civil litigation. Let me at least have him look at your case. I was too tired and too defeated to argue. I gave her my number and promised to call her husband. When I got home, I found 3 news vans parked on my street. Someone had tipped off the media. A reporter with Channel 7 News caught me before I could get to my door. Mr. Ingram, Stephanie Roberts, Channel 7. Is it true the HOA is foreclosing on your house because you saved a child's life? No comment. We'd love to tell your side of the story. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to blast the whole situation across every news channel in Colorado, but another part was just exhausted. Maybe tomorrow, I said, and escaped inside. That night, I barely slept. I kept doing the math in my head. My house was worth maybe $300,000. I owed $200,000 on the mortgage. Even if I sold after fees and paying off the loan, I'd have maybe $80,000. I'd lose my home, the first place I'd really felt settled after coming back from deployment, and I'd have to start over. Tuesday morning, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. News outlets, neighbors, even people from other states who'd somehow heard the story. The Facebook page Pinewood Heights Community Board had exploded with arguments. Some people supported me. Others insisted rules were rules. It was getting ugly. Teresa's husband, Marcus Ming, called at 9. Frank, I've been reviewing HOA law all night. Here's what I found. The HOA does have enforcement powers, but Colorado Statute 3833.3 209.5 requires that any enforcement action be reasonable and made in good faith. There's an argument that their actions weren't reasonable given the emergency circumstances. Can we win? Honestly, maybe, but litigation is expensive and slow. There might be another option. Have you considered going public? Really public? The news crews are camped outside my house. Then use them. Public pressure can be incredibly effective against HOAs. They rely on community perception. If the community turns against the board, they'll have to back down or face recall. I thought about it. I'd never been someone who sought attention. But I was also facing losing everything because I'd done the right thing. Okay, I said. Let's do it. By noon, I'd given interviews to 3 local news stations and 2 newspapers. The story spread like wildfire. By evening, it was on national news. The narrative was simple and compelling. Man saves dying child. HOA threatens to take his home. Social media exploded. The Pinewood Heights HOA Facebook page was flooded with angry comments from around the country. Someone started a GoFundMe to help with my legal fees, and it hit $20,000 in the first 6 hours. Messages of support poured in from everywhere, but Brenda Morrison wasn't backing down. She released a statement through the HOA's lawyer. While we sympathize with any medical emergency, rules and regulations exist for the good of all residents. Mr. Ingram's actions, while well-intentioned, caused significant damage to community property and set a dangerous precedent. The board stands by its decision. Wednesday morning, I woke to find someone had spray-painted "Heroes Live Here" on my driveway. It was technically vandalism, but I couldn't help but smile. Marcus called with an update. Frank, I've been talking to some people. There's a growing movement among residents to recall the entire HOA board. State law allows for a recall petition if 15% of homeowners sign it. You have 200 homes in Pinewood Heights. That means you need 30 signatures. How many do we have? As of this morning, 67. Things moved fast after that. By Thursday, a formal recall petition had been filed. The board was required to hold a special election within 30 days. Brenda tried to fight it, claiming procedural errors, but the petition had been prepared by Marcus and 2 other attorneys who'd volunteered their services. It was bulletproof. The attention wasn't all positive. I started getting hate mail mixed in with the support. Anonymous letters calling me an attention seeker, a fake hero, someone gaming the system for sympathy. One particularly nasty letter suggested I'd manufactured the entire emergency as a publicity stunt. That one hurt more than the others. Friday afternoon, I was in my garage trying to figure out the damage to my truck when a police car pulled up. Officer Patterson stepped out, the same one who'd called during the snow clearing. "Mr. Ingram, got a minute?" "Sure. Am I in trouble?" He smiled slightly. "Not with me. I wanted you to know that I wrote up a detailed report about Saturday morning, about the emergency circumstances, the medical necessity, everything. I sent it to the county sheriff and the district attorney's office. Why? Because what you did mattered. And because I looked into that HOA complaint. Your president, Mrs. Morrison, called us 4 times Saturday morning, not just about you operating equipment, but demanding we stop you, arrest you, impound your vehicles. She was obsessed with stopping you, even after I explained about the medical emergency. That seems excessive. That's what I thought, so I did some digging. Turns out Mrs. Morrison has filed 47 complaints against various residents in the past 2 years. 47. The department has a file on her 3 inches thick. Most are petty things. Cars parked wrong, lawn gnomes too visible from the street, wind chimes being too loud. Why are you telling me this? Because I think she might have gone too far this time. Interfering with emergency services is a crime in Colorado. If her actions directly impeded emergency medical care, that's criminally negligent behavior. I stared at him. You think she committed a crime? I think it's worth investigating. Just wanted you to know. After he left, I sat in my garage thinking. Could Brenda actually face criminal charges? It seemed too good to be true, like justice out of a movie rather than real life. That evening, the GoFundMe hit $50,000. Messages came from all over. Nurses, EMTs, doctors, people who'd lost loved ones because help arrived too late. People who understood exactly why what I'd done mattered. But the most important message came from Sophie herself. Teresa brought her by Friday evening. Sophie was small for 6, with big dark eyes and a shy smile. She wore a dinosaur t-shirt and held a hand-drawn picture. "Mr. Ingram, Sophie wanted to thank you herself." Sophie stepped forward and handed me the picture. It showed a stick-figure man driving a truck through snow, with a smiling sun overhead and the words "Thank you for saving me" written in careful letters. "I drew you," Sophie said quietly. "Mommy said you're a hero." I knelt down so I was at her level. "You're very welcome, Sophie." "How are you feeling?" "My tummy hurts, but the doctors say I'm going to be okay now. Mommy says you made sure I could get to the hospital. I just cleared some snow." Mommy says it was more than that. Teresa had tears running down her face. "Frank, we can never repay you. Never. You don't owe me anything. Just seeing her healthy is enough." After they left, I put Sophie's drawing on my refrigerator. Whatever happened with the HOA, whatever happened with my house, I had this. Proof that it mattered. That she mattered. The special recall election was scheduled for 3 weeks out. In that time, Pinewood Heights transformed into a war zone. Signs appeared on lawns, some supporting the current board and rule of law, others demanding recall the board and heroes not bureaucrats. The community was split and it was getting nasty. Someone slashed the tires on Brenda Morrison's Mercedes. I didn't condone it, but I understood the anger. She'd also started receiving threats, according to news reports, which I absolutely did not support. This was about accountability, not intimidation. Marcus was preparing a legal challenge to the fines and potential foreclosure. His strategy was to argue that Colorado's Good Samaritan laws protected my actions, and that the HOA's enforcement was retaliatory and not in good faith. We had a court date scheduled 2 weeks after the recall election. Meanwhile, the damage to my truck from the emergency plowing was extensive. The transmission was shot, the front axle was bent, and there was frame damage. Total repair cost $18,000. My insurance wouldn't cover it because I'd been using the vehicle in a non-standard way. The insurance company's exact words were off-label usage. The GoFundMe now covered my legal fees and the truck repairs, with money left over. But I felt weird about taking money from strangers, even if they were offering freely. I set up a separate fund to donate any excess to Denver Regional Hospital's pediatric transplant program. The local news ran a follow-up story about Sophie's recovery. They interviewed her transplant surgeon, Dr. Richard Foster, who stated clearly that if Sophie had arrived 30 minutes later, the donor organ would not have been viable. My actions had directly saved her life. Brenda Morrison's response was to issue another statement. While we're pleased the child recovered, it doesn't change that proper protocols exist for emergencies. Mr. Ingram should have contacted the County Emergency Management Office. A reporter had actually checked on this. The County Emergency Management Office was closed Saturday morning. Their emergency line redirected to a state dispatch center that would have taken hours to coordinate any response, if they'd responded at all to a private road issue. 2 weeks before the recall election, the district attorney's office announced an investigation into Brenda Morrison's conduct during the emergency. They were looking at whether her repeated attempts to stop emergency access constituted criminal interference. That's when things got really interesting. Brenda hired a lawyer, a shark named Timothy Cross, who specialized in defending white-collar criminals. He immediately started attacking me in the press, suggesting I'd violated multiple laws myself and that any charges against his client were politically motivated. But here's what Brenda and her lawyer didn't know. Officer Patterson had been thorough. His investigation had uncovered that Brenda had called the impound company at 2:15 Saturday morning, 45 minutes before I'd even woken up to the emergency call. She'd specifically instructed them to tow my plow attachment that night, despite the active snowstorm, because she wanted it gone immediately. The impound company had records of the call, time-stamped, recorded. Brenda had deliberately moved to remove my emergency equipment right before one of the worst snowstorms of the season. The district attorney's office was now investigating whether this was premeditated interference with emergency services. Marcus called me with the news. "Frank, this changes everything. If the DA can prove she acted with knowledge that her actions would impede emergency access, she's looking at felony charges, criminal negligence at minimum, possibly reckless endangerment. I never wanted her to go to jail. I just wanted to keep my house." "I understand, but Frank, what she did was serious. She prioritized HOA rules over human life, and she did it knowingly. That's not just civil, that's criminal." The recall election was held on a Tuesday evening in late February. The turnout was massive, nearly 90% of homeowners. I stood outside the community center with Teresa, Marcus, and about 50 supporters, waiting for the results. Inside, they were counting paper ballots. Under Colorado HOA law, recalls required a simple majority of voting homeowners. If we won, The entire board would be removed and a temporary board appointed until a new election could be held. At 8:45, Patricia Walsh emerged. She'd resigned from the board 2 weeks earlier in protest of their handling of my case. She was smiling. The recall passed. 72% in favor. The crowd erupted in cheers. People were hugging, crying, celebrating. I felt relief wash over me like a wave. The board that had tried to take my house was gone, but it wasn't over yet. I still had fines to contest and a court date to face. The recall removed the board, but didn't automatically void their actions against me. 3 days after the recall, the district attorney's office held a press conference. They were charging Brenda Morrison with 3 crimes: interference with emergency services, reckless endangerment, and criminal negligence. If convicted on all counts, she faced up to 4 years in prison and substantial fines. Her lawyer immediately announced they'd fight the charges, claiming his client had simply been enforcing HOA rules and had no knowledge of any specific emergency. But the prosecution had the recorded phone call to the impound company. They had Brenda's 4 calls to police trying to stop me. They had her refusal to release my equipment despite being explicitly told about the medical emergency. The case against her was strong. The new interim HOA board held their first meeting a week later. Patricia Walsh was appointed interim president. One of their first acts was to vote unanimously to dismiss all fines and charges against me. "Mr. Ingram," Patricia said during the meeting, "you acted heroically to save a life. This board recognizes that, and we apologize for how you were treated. All fines are dismissed, and we're formally authorizing you to continue clearing the access road during emergencies. We'll also be establishing a formal agreement with the county to recognize you as an emergency services volunteer." The room full of residents applauded. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe, but I had one question. What about the road damage, the $12,000 in repairs? Patricia smiled. We had an independent assessment done. The actual damage was minimal, about $800 in resurfacing. The original estimate was vastly inflated. We believe the previous board was using it as leverage against you. More applause. I stood and thanked them, and for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt hope. The criminal trial of Brenda Morrison began in late April. I was called as a witness. Sitting in that courtroom, watching her at the defense table with her expensive lawyer, I felt conflicted. I'd never wanted to destroy anyone's life, but I also couldn't forget that her actions had nearly killed Sophie. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented the timeline: Brenda ordering the tow at 2:15 a.m. during an active snowstorm, my emergency call at 3:10, Brenda's repeated calls to police demanding they stop me, her refusal to authorize release of my equipment despite being told about the medical emergency, the recorded call where she said, "I don't care about their emergency. He violated HOA rules." That last one was the killer. The jury heard her own voice saying she didn't care about the emergency. The defense tried to argue that she couldn't have known how serious it was, that she was just doing her job as HOA president, that enforcing rules wasn't a crime. But then the prosecution called Dr. Foster, Sophie's transplant surgeon. He explained in clinical detail what would have happened if Sophie had arrived 30 minutes later. The donor liver would have degraded beyond usability. Sophie would have been back on the transplant list, likely for months or years. Her condition was critical enough that she probably wouldn't have survived the wait. Then they called Teresa Ming. Teresa's testimony was emotional and powerful. She described getting the call that a donor liver was available, the desperate race against time, the terror of watching the clock knowing that every minute mattered. She described learning that the access road was blocked and that someone was trying to stop the man who could clear it. "I've never felt so helpless," Teresa said, crying openly. "My daughter was dying, and this woman was worried about property rules." The defense tried to object, claiming it was prejudicial, but the judge allowed it. This was about the real-world consequences of Brenda's actions. Finally, they called Sophie herself. She was 7 now, healthy and energetic. The prosecution asked her only a few simple questions. How did she feel before the transplant? How does she feel now? What does she want to be when she grows up? "A doctor," Sophie said clearly. "So I can save people like they saved me." The jury deliberated for 4 hours. They came back with guilty verdicts on all 3 charges. At sentencing 2 months later, the judge was stern. "Mrs. Morrison, you placed rules and regulations above human life. Your actions nearly resulted in the death of a child. While I recognize that you likely didn't intend such a tragic outcome, your callous disregard for the emergency situation demonstrates a troubling lack of judgment and basic human compassion." She sentenced Brenda to 18 months in prison, with eligibility for early release after 9 months for good behavior. She also ordered extensive community service upon release and prohibited her from serving on any HOA board for 10 years. Brenda's lawyer immediately filed an appeal, but most legal experts thought it would fail. The evidence had been overwhelming. I attended the sentencing but didn't speak. Teresa gave a victim impact statement, but kept it focused on Sophie and what they'd been through. She didn't attack Brenda personally, just explained the impact of her actions. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. I kept my statement brief. "I hope this sends a message that community rules should never outweigh human compassion and common sense. HOAs serve an important purpose, but they're not more important than people's lives." Life slowly returned to normal after that, though normal looked different now. The new HOA board established clear emergency protocols. I was formally recognized as an emergency services volunteer, with authorization to clear the access road whenever necessary. They even allocated funds to purchase proper snow removal equipment that would be stored at the community center, available for emergencies. My truck was repaired, though it never quite drove the same. Some things, once broken, don't fully heal, but it still ran, and that was enough. The GoFundMe had raised over $75,000. After legal fees, truck repairs, and reimbursing Kevin for his Bobcat, there was $40,000 left. I donated it all to Denver Regional Hospital's pediatric transplant program in Sophie's name. Sophie herself became a minor celebrity at her school. The girl who'd gotten a second chance at life thanks to a snowplow and a stubborn guy who wouldn't take no for an answer. She wrote me letters sometimes, telling me about her classes and her friends and how she was doing in science because she still wanted to be a doctor someday. Teresa and Marcus became good friends. Their family came over for dinner regularly, and Sophie declared that my house was her second favorite place because I had a big TV and always bought the good ice cream. The access road got used for 2 more emergency transports that winter. Both times, I cleared it without incident, and both times, lives were saved. The local news ran a story about it, framing me as the guardian of the pass, which was embarrassing but kind of nice. The following spring, the Pinewood Heights HOA held proper elections for a new permanent board. Patricia Walsh won president in a landslide. One of the new board members was George Patterson, the retired fire chief who'd stood up for me at that first meeting. Their first major initiative was working with the county to officially designate the access road as an emergency route, which meant county maintenance during major storms and proper signage. It also meant that any future HOA board couldn't block emergency access without risking serious legal consequences. Brenda Morrison served 9 months and was released. I heard through the grapevine that she moved to Wyoming to live with her sister. I didn't waste energy thinking about her. She'd made her choices and faced the consequences. That was enough. What stayed with me, what I thought about during quiet moments, was how close it had all come to going the other way. If I'd given up when my plow was impounded, if I hadn't found another way, Sophie would have died. Not might have died, would have died. And the system, the rules, the bureaucracy would have shrugged and said they were just following procedures. That's what haunted me and motivated me in equal measure. Rules matter. Community standards matter, but they're not more important than human life. They're not more important than a 6-year-old girl who wants to be a paleontologist. A year after everything happened, the hospital held a benefit dinner for their transplant program. They invited me as a special guest and asked me to say a few words. I stood at a podium looking out at 200 people, including a table full of Sophie's family, and tried to explain what that night had meant. "I'm not a hero," I said. "I just had a truck and a plow and a choice. The choice was easy. Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking rules. Sometimes compassion matters more than compliance. And sometimes, when you're facing down a wall of snow and a ticking clock, you just have to push forward and trust that it'll work out." Sophie, sitting at the front table in a fancy dress, gave me a thumbs up. Someone once told me that rules exist for a reason, that without them we have chaos. I think that's partially true. But I also think that rules without compassion aren't rules at all. They're just obstacles. And when those obstacles stand between a child and a chance at life, they need to be pushed aside. The applause was generous, but what mattered more was the conversation afterward. Doctors, nurses, administrators, all sharing stories of times when protocol had to bend for humanity. Times when someone had to make the hard choice to do what was right instead of what was required. That night, driving home through clear streets under a star-filled Colorado sky, I thought about everything that had happened. The fear, the anger, the fight, but also the goodness that had emerged. The community that had rallied, the strangers who donated, the people who'd stood up and said this wasn't okay. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. It was Kevin. "Hey man, you see the weather report?" "No, why?" "Big storm coming this weekend. Might be a foot of snow." I looked at my truck, parked in the garage, the plow attachment gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The HOA-approved plow attachment, I should say, with all the proper permits and authorizations. "Let it come," I said. "I'm ready." And I was. Because sometimes life is measured not in the rules you follow, but in the moments you choose to stand up for what matters. For me, that meant keeping a road clear. But really, it meant keeping a promise to a community, to the people who depended on that access, and most importantly to a little girl with her whole life ahead of her. The storm came that weekend. I cleared the road. No emergencies this time, just prevention, just being ready, just being there. And in the end, that's what community really means. Not perfect lawns and uniform mailboxes and rules about where you can park your trash cans. It means showing up when someone needs you. It means being ready to push through the snow and the obstacles and the bureaucracy to do what's right. I learned that lesson the hard way, fighting an HOA that valued compliance over compassion. But I learned it. And now, whenever snow falls on Pinewood Heights, everyone knows the access road will be clear. Because some things matter more than rules. Some things matter more than anything.